about three most impactful books on me. And yeah, I think books, a lot of types of books, these are the ones that really shaped the way I look at the world, helped me to understand it, and just gave me these ahas. And I've read a lot of books, enjoy it tremendously. These three are ones that are just the most impactful, really, on shaping the way I look at things outside of the Bible. And so, yeah, going through those. First one, dive right into it, is called The Fallacy Detective. So, it's a book about how to think, how to approach statements that people make, statements that are claimed, maybe in the news, maybe statements I make, ways I say something, ways people say something to me, instead of just taking them in as gospel or rejecting them defensively. How do we analyze thoughts, or even in books? How do we break those down and really look at those and examine them for what they are? And that's a huge process for just how we approach people and engage, what kind of person, what kind of character they have, or when we read articles and sadly, news and journalism is not what it used to be, and just a lot of statements that are made aren't, hey, tell me what's going on and what's the facts. It's a lot about trying to sway. So this book really helped to break that down, and it gets into fun ways. It shows how to examine different statements and different approaches to arguments or just statements. Breaks down a lot of fallacy arguments, things that really aren't factual or statements to lay out as evidence, essentially. And it does it in a fun format, easy to read. And then we can compare what's true or what's factual to a faulty one. But a lot of times you've got to break that down into what are faulty ones and how do you categorize them? How do you refer to them? Just names and language to put this stuff. So super impactful for me. So I love that. And that way I can break things down. And frankly, we've all done these things and these statements. We've presented good evidence and in the spirit of having a good debate. And it's certain ways that are fallacies, if you will, of approaching arguments and topics, essentially to shut people down or to distract or divert from the real point. So it's how to keep on point so we can all learn, we can all grow as we dig into stuff. So Fallacy Detective, number one, looks like a kid's cartoon book. It's amazing. I read it every so often just to get refreshed on it. Number two, this one's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, a guy, Harvard professor and researcher, psychologist or psychiatrist, and he breaks down how we look at ourselves and others, more of like a how do we show up, or why do we do this pattern or show up this way or respond or react in this kind of way when things happen. And it's a whole different template versus kind of the current, I'll call it, maybe American or national or world, mental health template, which kind of looks at labels and names and kind of a chemical soup, if you will, to approach like how we're doing, or when we get anxious about something, or we just blow up in anger about something, like, oh, you have a chemical reaction or something, let's manage you with medications is a common approach, not with counselors necessarily. But he just kind of recreates the wheel in a sense and says this is how we can look at how we as people interact in the world, and when it goes well, when it doesn't, and what's going on inside of us. And yeah, there's a real source, and how do we approach that? How do we break it down? Why do we physically get affected in our bodies by certain interactions that happen and life events and stuff like that, and that are ongoing? And he really links it together in a way that's just amazing, and he makes it make sense. He really knows his stuff. I've heard him speak in person once. Really cool to hear in person as well. So anyhow, yeah, my number two is that, because these human interactions with people, I want to do them great, and I'm always learning and growing, and I've come a long ways, and I'm sure all of us do. But how do we approach that, and how do we look at ourselves and others, and when things go right or wrong, and where does that come from? And then how do we kind of unpack that? So it's a lot more meaningful and, quite frankly, just truthful approach. It's not this. It's kind of how do we get to a really a better get to the root source, and how do we get to a better root endpoint about our relationships we have in life, is how I take that. So anyhow, amazing book. It's one of those, once again, I'm reading, I'm like, whoa, you're rocking me with how you're looking at people in life in a way that I hadn't before. So super cool book. Number three is one I'm going to post up here, not the physical copy, but as I'm talking here, it's by Francis Schaeffer. It's called How Should We Then Live? Politicians will always say, oh, we're doing amazing, or we're doing horrible, just depending on if you want to get elected, or the newspapers will, or news sources will report terrible things and murders, or this and that. But I want to know, how are we really doing? And it's easy to say America's all terrible or America's all amazing, and really, where are we at kind of in the bigger history, and kind of how do we just take a step back and look at the decades? I was born in the 70s, and how do we look at 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, and if you're younger, what's happened? What's true? We're led to believe that certain things these days, and we're taught in school. And this guy, takes a step back and takes a look at a bigger picture of our whole country. He looks at art, he looks at books, he looks at movies, like you name it. He looks at all aspects of society and breaks it down and goes, really, where are we at and why? And makes an amazing case based on, like I said, art and literature and culture and trends, and even building architecture, to say what's a sign of a good society and where are we at. And it just makes sense, and it lands on, wow, this guy just has put a ton of work into it, gets it. Just a world rocking book, and makes things just click. So if you're looking for something to kind of take a step back and say, hey, where are we as a country and civilization, where are we at? And it hinges on the Bible. I mean, it hinges on truly, and frankly, there's a key point. The more we believed in the Bible as a guide, a literal guide to where we are, the better we did. When it changed, which is in the early 1920s, when we started to shift just one slow step away, we started to let other things, really culture and just kind of wanting to do our own thing, creep in, essentially. Just the shifts that happened. And then kind of the next big shift was really the 60s, was really that generation, although some good food came out of it, mostly, quite frankly, just a more horrible worldview about the sexual revolution and how we look at drugs, and just got away further. The biggest jump, I'd say, from a biblical worldview was that period of time when we've just kind of continued to just decline and descend morally, if you will, since that point. And how do we get back? How do we get back on track? And the Bible is a book of peace. It's a way to story of God's love and pursuit for us, and how do we get back on track. And ultimately, we're going to have better, more peaceful lives. We'll have better families. We'll have better communities because of it. But just lays it out in a way that is the strongest that I've, without question, ever seen. And so amazing. Francis Schaeffer. How Should We Then Live? This one's not the easiest read, but just I take it in small chunks and go from there. So anyhow, those are three most impactful books for me. I have a lot of other books in different categories, fun books. Other categories. But anyhow, most impactful ones in the way I look at the world. Really well written, all three of them, and really a part of how to have a great life. So those are ones that are most impactful for me. Hope you can check them out and enjoy them too. Thanks for watching, and hope you'll have a great day. Thanks.